Welcome to SethCraft. 9 months ago, I started building this 20 by 30 workshop. It has been quite the adventure. It's the biggest thing that I've ever built, but I am very excited to show you the final product. Let's do a walkthrough of the entire build, and I will show you the things that I thought were successful and the things that I could have improved, and just talk about the building in general. So this is going to be a bit of a long video, but I think you'll enjoy it. Let's get to it. Let's start at the beginning. First of all, my neighbor drove down here with his machine and cleared off this space. You guys stay in here, okay? There was a hill here, as you can see right here, that went all the way down to about there. And so he used his machine, cleared everything off, and after that, I built a retaining wall. So far has been doing fantastic. I'm glad I built that, even though it was a lot of work. So starting with the foundation, I laid out my batter boards and got the string lines attached so that I could find where my straight lines would be. I wanted the building to be in line with my other building so that in the future I could build a little storage room between the two. And so that's why the alignment is there. I poured concrete. I actually used my ram pump from the creek to bring water up here and got those concrete footers poured. There was 35 of them in total, which was a lot of work. After the footers were poured, I spent 5 hours getting everything leveled out with these blocks. That was the most tedious part of the entire build, was getting the entire 20 by 30 shop leveled out, having to use 2x4s, those blocks, and then also shingles in order to lift this up so that no matter where I was on the building, it was level. I then laid down some plastic as a barrier, and some people gave me grief over that, but even on a dry day, if I lift up this plastic, it's wet up under there. So that plastic produces or prevents a lot of moisture from getting up to the building. After that, I spent a couple of days getting the frame built here, the foundation of the building, and I also installed some foam insulation. I used rigid foam and just cut it to length and put it in between all the cavities, and I feel like that has made a big improvement in keeping this place warm or cool, depending on the time of the year. After that, I installed the plywood floor, which I used a 3/4 inch treated plywood. Any of these remaining exposed pieces will be covered later with the porch that's going to go on here. I used that because it's very durable and also waterproof for any spills that I may have in the future. Once I had the foundation done, it was time to start building walls. The walls that I built were 2x4, and I built them in either 5-foot or 10-foot sections in order to allow me the ability to lift them up into position by myself. Those took not much time because walls frame up really quick. Once I had the walls installed, I then put the top plate on, and then the trusses were installed. Now the trusses I did purchase. I didn't build those myself. There's a local truss building company that I used. Whenever they delivered my trusses, the young fellow that was driving backed into my car and totaled it. And that's why I now have a new truck. The trusses I was able to lift into place and set all of them by myself, even though it was a bit of a struggle at first. I found a method that worked out well, and that was using a 2x4 that was 10 foot long that I could pick up and swing everything into place. I'm glad I discovered that because otherwise I don't think I would have been able to get these all installed on my own. Now on the walls, I installed OSB, which is oriented strand board, and that gave a tremendous amount of structure strength to this building. And I like doing that. Don't have to do it. You can just put your sheathing on the outside, but I like to put the OSB on there just because I feel like it adds extra support to the building, especially whenever you're up on the roof getting the sheathing up there. That is actually one of my favorite tasks, believe it or not. I just like the moment when you get that OSB on the roof and then you lay out that underlayment and the inside of your building becomes weathered in. And then you can kind of slow down and think about stuff because you don't have to worry about everything getting wet on the inside. Whenever I installed the OSB on the roof, I used something called an H-clip, and that gives a proper spacing to prevent any kind of warping whenever the OSB heats up. I installed Tyvek home wrap on the outside of my OSB, and that is a waterproof barrier that allows the interior of the building to breathe, or in other words, lets moisture out. And I think that is also very important when building a structure like this. On the roof, I did metal because it's easy to install, looks good, and should last for a very long time. The metal roofing was also delivered by a delivery truck, and I'm glad I did that instead of picking it up on my own because over 12-foot sheets is not easy to work with. So definitely consider having that delivered instead of picking it up. I also enjoy installing the metal roof. I was able to use a chalk line across the ridge cap, and that gave me the exact location of each panel. And so by the time it was done, it was a nice, consistent, smooth edge, and it has worked out very well. I did use the drip edge. I used full sheets of metal. I used the ridge vent. I used a ridge cap. The fascia material that I installed is Miratech. It's a compressed wood material that is pre-primed and is not supposed to rot, so hopefully it'll do well. Now for the soffit, I used a LP Smart Side, and that is another type of Orient strand board, but it has slits in it to allow airflow to go in from the soffit up to the ridge vent and out. So that'll help to keep moisture out of the attic and also allow the heat to either pass through in the summertime or to move that air out in the wintertime. On the outside of the building, I used hardy board siding. It's a very heavy concrete board that is going to last forever, especially when painted. This stuff is not easy to work with, but once it's installed, I think it looks pretty good, and after you paint it, it looks even better. For the trim, I used more of the Miratech, and that is going to also last for a very long time underneath the eaves of this building. Now for the exterior doors, I built them myself. I looked at the prices and saw that they were well above $1,400 to get a double door and almost about $800 for a single door. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to build them myself. And so I did. They have turned out well. The install was not too bad, besides these doors being very heavy. And I'm happy so far with the results. The windows that I went with are vinyl new construction windows. They are not very big, I think 24 by 36 inch, and that's plenty enough to let in lots of light, but also allow lots of wall space on the inside, not taking up too much room with those windows. Now after that, everything on the outside is complete, other than maybe adding some outdoor receptacles. I am so glad to have the outside of this building done. All right, let's move to the inside real quick. Now on the inside of the building, I decided to put some walls up. I wanted to have a dedicated space for laser engraving machines. I wanted an office space, and then I wanted to have a dedicated space for more traditional woodworking, and also have a space to review and test out electronics. So I also built a utility closet, and that allows me to close off my power system so it's not visible in videos, but also reduces the sound some on my off-grid inverter and all of that equipment. So after those walls were done, I then moved on to electrical. Now this took quite a while. I had several runs of both outlet power and also light power, and I decided to run a separate set of circuits for my other off-grid system so that I have receptacles in each room and also some lighting as well. Now that added an additional breaker box or sub panel into my building and had to get all of that wired up as well. Once the electrical stuff was done, I moved on to getting the insulation installed. And that was, as you expect, not a very fun project, but I'm glad that I insulated all the walls for sound and for temperature control. After that, I also insulated the ceiling. Now I used R19 in the ceiling and R13 in the walls. And around in this area, it does get a little bit cool in the winter time. I've seen temperatures down to about 5 degrees. So honestly, I probably should have used maybe an R38, but that stuff is expensive. So what we have is just an R19. Once I had the insulation done on the entire building, including the walls and the ceiling, I moved on to putting my ceiling cover up. I decided to go with a plastic corrugated material that was easy to install and looks pretty good. Now it came in 12-foot sections, which made it a little bit awkward to do by myself, and also lining up or matching up all the seams was a bit difficult. However, it was pretty easy to cut with a razor blade, and just use some blocking and a jig to hold that up, and use some of those metal washer screws to hold this in place. After I finished up the ceiling, I moved on to the walls. Now my neighbor had a huge stockpile of 1/2-inch maple plywood, and this is nice stuff, and he gave me an amazing deal on this. And so I bought a bunch of it and used it as the walls. After the walls were installed, I then decided to paint everything white. I decided to go with white because since I do YouTube videos, I figured it would be good to have as bright a room as possible, and that white color has really helped out a lot. After the walls were done, I then put window trim on the inside of the building to help hide those Tyvek pieces and also to make the windows look a lot more attractive. I just used some of these scrap plywood that I had laying around, and that saved a bunch of money by doing it that way. I could have gone to the store and gotten molding, but I decided, you know what? This plywood looks nice enough, let's just go with that. After the windows are done, technically everything is finished, but I decided to add a shelf all the way around in this building. And that shelf has can lights hanging down, which provide a lot of light and look really nice. And the shelf is plenty strong enough to put tons of things up on for storage. Now, because this is a workshop, I also have installed some workbenches. I've got one in my area for testing out electronics. I've got one in my woodworking area, which will hold a CNC machine and also just have a general space for storing stuff and working on things. And then in the laser room, I have another workbench which will hold laser engraving machines. I have my double door as we saw outside, and that's where the front porch is going to be. And I made this door plenty big so I can get lots of stuff in here, especially full sheets of plywood. So over here in this corner is going to be where my electronics testing is. I've got the workbench built over here. Still needs to be painted, but it looks really good. Very strong on that wall with the 2 different legs. I also have this 3/4 inch plywood attached to the wall, and I'm going to be installing a hoist up here so that I can pick up things that are too heavy. For instance, 130-pound batteries will be nice to pick up and review on my table. But at the hoist, we'll put inverters and batteries on the wall for doing tests, and that should be really fun. So that's that. And then I'll have a French cleat wall back here for storing and showing display stuff. So that will be something to look forward to. Now on my shelf up here, it's strong enough to hold hundreds of pounds, especially over here where my hoist is going to go. And I've also put can lights in here, which I can turn on right here, and you can see what those look like. And that will be beneficial for filming stuff over there in that corner as well. Now moving on this way, I have my utility room, which is already filling up very quick. I've got the Lux Power in this corner, and that will soon have a 15K battery in the space that's available right here. I've got the transfer switch, I've got my main breaker panel, and over here is the off-grid Orient power system. That's a 6,500 watt inverter. This one over here is a 240 volt, 12,000 watts. So can run pretty much everything off of that. Now I've got a heater installed over here to keep everything warm in the winter. I've actually had this thing on when it was 5 degrees, and it kept everything in here above freezing. Now as far as lighting goes in this room, of course the can lights over there, I've got this big 150 watt light, and I also have this honeycomb light, and that is producing plenty of good usable light in here. Now, moving over here to this side of the room, this is where my more traditional woodworking is going to be. I'm going to have a vise over here in this corner on my workbench, have plenty of space to work with, and over here is where I'm going to be doing some CNC work. So I have a little tablet or computer over here to work with, and hopefully have plenty of space there for doing that. Now there's also can lights on this shelf, and they are nice and bright, providing plenty of light all the way around. And again, that shelf is strong enough to hold all kinds of stuff up there. Very happy to have that. Now, let's talk about the ceiling that I used. Turn this off. Let's turn that off too. I used this plastic corrugated ceiling, and it's kind of designed to be used for like greenhouse roofs or up underneath a porch to keep water out. But I think it looks decent here in my shop. There are a few places, like right over here, that I struggled to get the alignment right, and over there as well. However, I'm happy with it. It's got a little bit of an echo, but I think once I get all of my stuff in here, that's gonna go away. Now, I'm anticipating this room to produce a lot of dust, and so I made this door, which closes up pretty good. I may have to add some extra little trim pieces around there. But I also put a piece of plastic because it was hitting the wall over here. But that right there will help reduce sound if I'm filming in the other room, and also help to prevent dust from in here getting into my next room. So moving on, I'm calling this the office space, but honestly, I don't know really what's going to go in here just yet. But I've got a window over here in this corner. All the walls are painted white. And the shelf goes almost all the way around to the other side, except for right in there. Again, can lights in here. So I know it's a little awkward, but I've got these switches up here that will turn on the can lights. It's because my internet switch up there has to have power on all the time. So turn that off. Windows, I did get some trim around there, and I just used the same plywood that I used for the walls and trimmed this out. Also put it up in there, so it looks good. I'm glad I did that. Here's my single exterior door, which will eventually go into that connecting room out there. Right now it just goes outside. And now, this room is a mess, but this is the laser room. So I'm gonna have a duct work up here that will go outside, and then it'll sneak around, and I'll have 4 different down spouts to go to the lasers. And I'm also going to have a spot over here with one coming down for testing out here in the middle, which that'll make sense later on. I've got the good size workbench built in here so that I can have those laser engraving machines. There's my ductwork I have to get installed. And then I'm going to be using these wire shelves for storing of materials. I've got all this space up under here as well for storing stuff. Been using this little wall heater at the moment, until eventually I will get a mini split in here to allow me to keep this place heated and cooled. I also built a door in here because if I'm running these laser engraving machines and I have to have the window open for ventilation, I'm going to want to have this room isolated with the heat or cool out here maintaining the same. So, all right, well, very cool. Hopefully you've enjoyed this final walkthrough of what I've been working on for the past 9 months. My workshop is done. I have spent right at 9 months building this place. It has been a fun project, and I have learned so much while doing this. It has been the biggest project I've ever started and completed, and I am very happy to now have a 20 by 30 workshop to do all kinds of work. If you've enjoyed this video, I would ask that you would subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure you leave a comment so I know your thoughts on this build. I'm Seth with the SethCraft Workshop, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.